We've already heard President Trump react to this decision. And one of the things he said in those public comments in Tennessee was that the judge here displayed unprecedented judicial overreach. Is he right in saying that? Is it unprecedented?
Aisha, I agree with President Trump on this one. As a trial lawyer for 20-plus years, I will tell you that the one place that I thought we could be immune from a political agenda is the courtroom. And I believe that this ruling by Judge Watson evidences what I call courtroom chaos, because it is based more on political motivation and emotion than it is logic. To give you an example, his comments in this executive order, they read more like a movie script, like a mystery novel, than they did an actual court order. He's citing, for example, Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York City, having conversations with Donald Trump about a Muslim ban and how to enforce this. He's citing comments made on Anderson Cooper's show to support his ruling on this executive order. And I will tell you, rest assured, that when this ruling by Judge Watson makes its way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, the Supreme Court justices are not going to be considering extraneous comments made during an election, nor will they consider comments made on TV shows in ruling on this case.
Okay, so let's play one of the comments that the judge was actually considering when he delivered this opinion. As Brian said, there were a number of them. One of them was, in fact, Stephen Miller, a senior aide to Donald Trump. This is what he said.
Well, one of the big differences that you're going to see in the executive order is that it's going to be responsive to the judicial ruling, which didn't exist previously. And so those are mostly minor technical differences. Fundamentally, you're still going to have the same basic policy outcome for the country, but you're going to be responsive to a lot of very technical issues that were brought up by the court, and those will be addressed. But in terms of protecting the country, those basic policies are still going to be in effect.
John, I guess we'll find out the legalities of all of this, when it works its way through the court system. But for now, that kind of tough talk coming from the White House, has it backfired?
Well, I think they should rename the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences, because it's a place where all good ideas go to die. And the president has said that he's going to appeal this. He's going to take it all the way to the Supreme Court if he has to. And this is why the fight over his nominee for the vacancy on the Supreme Court is so important, because this could very well be a 5-4 decision. And you have liberal scholars, including Alan Dershowitz, who has gone public and said that he thinks that Trump's going to win this thing in the Supreme Court.
Matt, they're spinning it, saying it's all politics that's waded into the judicial process.
Well, Trump said we're going to be sick of all the winning. Are we sick of all the winning yet? I mean, he keeps losing on this same thing. A couple of problems for Trump here. One is 50 days or so into his administration, they're focused on this Muslim ban instead of a lot of the issues that the people elected him to work on, which are, for example, jobs, infrastructure, tax cuts, those things. We're focused on this Muslim ban. He keeps losing on the same thing. It's obvious that they're trying to ban Muslims. Rudy Giuliani was on TV saying they asked him how to ban Muslims. Then they tried to ban Muslims. We do not have a religious test in this country. That's part of the United States and what we're founded upon. He's trying to ban Muslims. They keep blocking him. Stop. Concentrate on what people elected you on.
Okay, well, the president brought up the issue of national security yet again as one of the reasons why this ban was so important. This is what Donald Trump had to say.
Hundreds of refugees are under federal investigation for terrorism and related reasons. We have entire regions of the world destabilized by terrorism and ISIS. For this reason, I issued an executive order to temporarily suspend immigration from places where it cannot safely occur.
Brian, the problem for President Trump is that the evidence that the judge saw in Hawaii just didn't back up those statements.
Well, that's what Judge Watson says. But what about the fact that 91% of Muslims worldwide are not included in this alleged Muslim ban? Judge Watson had the audacity, John, in his ruling to mock that fact. In other words, he said, oh, just because there's 91% of Muslims not in this travel ban, that doesn't make a difference. Because if you just exclude one Muslim from coming into this country, then that's unconstitutional. Well, that's not how the law works, Judge Watson. And I will tell you that what's different here, John, is that there is now empirical evidence. Remember in that first executive order, we talked about this. There was no evidence put forth by the government of any public safety threat. It was just rhetoric. Well, now we have Donald Trump actually saying that we have over 300 individuals, refugees in our country being investigated for domestic terrorism. Now that he cites that, people mock him on that. It's never ending.
Matt, to bring you in there, you're shaking your head.
Yeah.
Not only has that been rejected by the judge in Honolulu, but there's also the question of whether the president is simply overreaching his own powers when it comes to the issue of national security.
Well, the problem with what Brian is saying is that the Department of Homeland Security, Trump's Department of Homeland Security, has said this Muslim ban will not make the United States any safer. Sean Spicer, who's Donald Trump's press secretary, said there are no imminent threats from any of these countries. So I don't think that the idea is that there are terrorist threats coming. We've had a lot of shootings in the United States over the last few years. When that person went into Newtown and shot a bunch of first graders, he wasn't a Muslim. But Donald Trump is trying to take advantage of the fact that people are very scared of terrorism, which terrorism is obviously a big problem, and he's trying to ban Muslims. You could only he's trying to start out with the first few countries, but his own administration has said we'd start out with these first few countries and then we'd like to expand it.
If this judge can consider conversations had on the show on Fox News that you watch when you're eating your breakfast, can we please at least consider the comments that ISIS has put out and tweeted out where they say that they plan on infiltrating the ranks of refugees and sneaking them into Western countries so they can commit acts of terror? Can we at least consider that too?
But the United States has a totally different policy than countries in Europe. In Europe, you get on a boat from one country to another. It's impossible to vet those people. In the United States, we have a 2-year vetting process. That is extreme vetting. That's been working.
But ISIS has said that's their express purpose of what they're trying to do. They're trying to sneak them in.
They can say what they want, but doesn't there need to be a
in.
presentation of evidence that that is a specific threat to the United States, which is why this ban is needed? And unfortunately, Donald Trump and evidence are two things which are missing at the moment. That's not being put forward when it comes to this case.
Well, it's not.
At least according to this judge.
It's not just the United States, it's the West. But we did find Iraqi refugees in Bowling Green, Kentucky, who are conspiring to commit acts of terror.
In Iraq. And they were conspiring to support
acts in Iraq.
Okay, but nonetheless, we're importing people who are aspiring terrorists. We saw various acts in Europe where people have come in with papers of being refugees.
Let me ask you a question.
This is a real problem.
Of all the shootings in the United States in the last 15 years, have any of these people come from the countries?
That's not the point. The point.
Well, that is a pretty big
point. The number
point.
should be zero. It should be zero.
It is zero in the last 15 years. All of those domestic terrorist acts that have occurred over the last 15 years have been people who live in the United States and have been here for a long time. They're not people coming from these countries.
Even Homeland Security did a report and found that the vast majority of domestic terrorist acts that were carried out in this country were carried out by second generation that were radicalized in their 15th year after they had arrived. So, banning people from these countries, it will be, will have no effect on
that's
them.
a problem too, but also people who are coming over here and immigrating legally who are clearly radicals, who want to come here to kill people, like the San Bernardino terrorist. She was radicalized before she ever moved here, and the evidence that I've seen says that she radicalized the husband even more.
Brian, to bring you in here, I mean, isn't it a spurious argument, this notion that there are some people in this country who don't want to see the country safe, that they're against safety here? I think everyone is for safety. I think the question more likely is the way this administration is going about achieving that.
Right, great point, Aisha. And I think that goes to the issue I made earlier, which is President Trump has earmarked 6 countries, the same 6 countries that President Obama had also identified as hotbeds for domestic terrorism. So Donald Trump is not simply putting his hand over his eyes and just picking, 20 countries to pick on. He has data that is supported by our previous President Obama. He has now centered that information on countries that have predominant terrorist cells. And what he's trying to do, Aisha, is simply put a delay on the process of vetting. He's not saying this is a permanent ban on Muslims from these 6 countries coming into this country. He's saying we need to take a deep breath, take 120 days, and let's do a better job of vetting folks coming from those countries into the United States to ensure public safety. Plain and simple.
I want to finish up with John here because, regardless of getting into the weeds of, this decision, if you look at this from 2,000 feet, what you see is that this administration has tried twice and failed to implement an executive order. The first time they botched the rollout, it was chaos and confusing and a disaster. They've tried again and it's been rejected again. I mean, the perception is that this administration can't get their act together.
Politically speaking, it would probably be better for him to wait until right after a terrorist attack to do something like this. But this is why we elected an outsider. We don't want him to wait. We want him to be proactive.
But we don't want a president who just keeps fighting and losing. You've got to, at some point, try to fulfill the agenda that people elected you for. People want to know about jobs. They want to know about infrastructure. They don't. He's spending his first 2 months on this Muslim ban. I think it's a mistake.
Hold that thought. Stay with us.
And the conversation continues.
Come back after the break. Our thanks to Brian Claypool for joining us as well. Brian, we appreciate
always
your
appreciate
contribution
it.
and insights.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks, Aisha.
You're welcome. Thank you.